Hi, this is Dr. Kay Sweetser at San Diego State University, and I want to talk to you a little bit about how to prepare a presentation for the International Public Relations Research Conference. This conference, IPRRC, is very different than normal academic conferences. The traditional type of academic conference, what I might call AEJ style, is where everyone, all of the presenters are up at the front at a table in front of an audience, and each presenter goes one after the other. Question and answer comes all the way at the end, and presenters typically get about 12-ish minutes to do their presentation. During that time, they should be extemporaneous, and sometimes presenters have PowerPoints. I would never recommend that because technology can always fail, and the turnover time from presenter to presenter when you're changing out computers or loading up your PowerPoint really digs into the time. Now, that's AEJ style. That is not how IPRRC does their presentation style. Completely different. The main benefit of IPRRC is that the small group construction of how they do their presentations allows for real dialogue and real conversation about what it is that you studied. Someone who might come to your table and listen to your presentation might dig into the method. Another person might dig into what it means to the practice. And you get a really great opportunity to get real quality feedback on your research study, whether it is the findings, the data analysis, the literature, or its applicability to the practice. This is because the crowd at IPRRC is a mixture of not only academics, to include graduate students, but also practitioners who are interested in measurement and theory and metrics and how to better their own practice through a more strategic thinking process that we might test out in our research. So the format for IPRRC is actually that each presenter or presenter team will be seated at a table, literally a round table, and then people will move around to the different tables. Maybe there's 5 presentations, 6 presentations going on at a time during a session, and people will move around to the table throughout the slotted time that you have. So you might be prepared to present and repeat your presentation 4 times, maybe as many as 5 times. It depends how long the sessions are going to be. You should prepare probably no more than a total of 7 minutes of remarks. These remarks need to be completely extemporaneous, and they really need to cover the highlights of what it is that you did in your study. A little bit about method and theory, but mostly what you found and focusing on your unique contribution from your research study and your data. So what will happen is that when your panel presentation slot starts, let's say it's the 8 a.m. slot, you go into the main conference room in a hotel where they're holding the conference, and you sit down at a table, and then all the other presenters will sit at other tables. You will have the first group come over to you. People will say, "What's your study?" And you need to be able to have a really quick thing. I looked at how PR practitioners use measurement, or I did an experiment testing source credibility. You need to be able to have a really quick little soundbite, so as people are walking around asking, "What is your study about?" that you can provide a really quick understanding for them so that they can decide which table they want to go to first. So people will sit down at the table, and then the moderators will probably say who's at each table and what the paper topic is, and then you start. So during this time, the moderators are walking around and they're listening to the presentations, and you're going to have to speak during this 7 minutes of time extremely loudly. I mean, imagine a room filled with 5 other tables, and all these people are presenting at the same time as you, so there's a lot of talking. And so you need to project your voice in a way that everybody at that very large round table can hear you. And it's incumbent on you to make sure that you are presenting and conveying your information so that they can hear you, because there is a competition associated with this. And if people can't hear what you're saying, then they can't ask really good questions, they can't get engaged, and of course your presentation points sort of fall by the wayside. While those moderators are walking around, more than likely, they are some of the people who are going to be grading you in this overall competition for things like the Big Jack Award, which is a fantastic cash prize given traditionally to graduate students who do a great job presenting quantitative, completed, original research. So you want to make sure that your presentation style is also sounds really good to the moderator, as well, of course, to the people who are seated at your table. About 7-ish minutes in, kind of varies based on who the timekeeper is. The moderator is going to call out, okay, stop your presentations, it's time for question and answer. And so at this point, you need to wrap up very quickly whatever it is you're saying, and then start to take questions and answers. If you didn't finish your presentation, this, of course, as you're answering questions, you can start to work in part of the additional things that you wanted people to know as a part of your presentation that you didn't have time for. However, if you just if you ignore the moderator and continue on with your presentation, you're going to be docked points as you are considered for things like the Big Jack Award. So pay attention to the rules and practice for the rules to get your presentation nice and tight and in this expected time period so that you're successful. There's going to be great question and answer. Never guess on anything. It's okay to say, I don't have that right in front of me, or I don't have the full paper here, or we'll certainly look at that later. It's okay to sort of not answer a question directly, A, if you don't know the answer, or B, if you don't have the information in front of you, or something maybe that it wasn't the point of your study. You want to retain complete composure, professionalism, and the desire to create that dialogue between you and the audience member who is asking you a question. So you want to make a connection with your audience and start a conversation. A lot of times the questions are not going to be mean and pointed about, how did you measure this, or how did you do that? Although certainly that can happen. I've been known to ask a question or two like that to panels that I have heard presented at the conference, but it becomes more of a, oh, your research paper made me think about X, Y, and Z. So with this, after they finish your first round, then they're going to call switch. And that's when people get up from your table, they go to another table, and then a new group comes to you. Now, some people, if they were really interested in your research study, they're going to stay at your table and they're going to sit through that again, and then they're going to pepper you with questions for the second time as you guys go through. So just kind of keep these things in mind. Obviously, it's difficult to repeat the same information almost exactly the same way 4 to 5 different times throughout this conference as you're doing your back-to-back presentations. But it is important to remember that as each group comes in, this is a new group. They didn't hear your last presentation. They don't know all of the other pieces that you had set up. And so even though you feel like, oh, I just said this, you need to say it again, because you need to have every single delivery of your presentation to be the best, especially so that you can be competitive for the award. The content of your presentation, again, 7 minutes. Everybody needs to talk from my perspective, but it needs to be conversant, it needs to be engaging, and you really need to feel what it is that you're saying. Of course, you want to introduce yourselves as well as your topic. You don't necessarily need to read your research paper title because they can see that in the booklet. But you can say, hi, my name is Dr. Kay Sweetser. I'm from San Diego State University, and I looked at how PR practitioners use metrics as a part of my research study that I did. All right, so that didn't repeat the title, very quickly told people what it was I was looking at, and then I'm ready to start my actual presentation, although that introduction counted as part of my 7 minutes. So you do want to name the theory that you're using as a part of this and give a little bit of a background. But remember, all of these people who are sitting at the table have probably worked with and studied and may have even have authored whatever theory it is that you're using in your study. So if you're talking about agenda setting, you don't need to explain for 10 minutes what agenda setting is. You can quickly say, you know, this study was driven by agenda setting theory. Agenda setting, of course, comes from a Combs and Shaw's 1972 piece that reminds us that the media doesn't tell us what to think, it tells us what to think about. And so as a part of that, we, X, Y, and Z. And then you move on to describe your part of the study. So give a nice overview of what your theory is, but very, very quick by naming the theory, describing it for the people who may not be as familiar with it, but not going deep down into it, because this presentation is about what you did, not what other people did. So after you provide a little bit of background about why you were interested in your study and what it was driven by, you want to go immediately into the method section. So that first part, the intro and the lit review section, should probably take maybe about a minute, probably no more, maybe a minute and a half ish. Then you go into the method. In the method, you need to say whether it was an experiment, a survey, a content analysis, a focus group, whatever. And then you also need to talk about how it was delivered. This was an online survey, an online experiment, etc. You want to talk about the sample. Now, you don't need to go in and say our sample was the average age of 23.29 with a standard deviation of blah, 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 blah. No, you can say we used a student sample because, and then justify it. And we reached out to them through an online human subjects system that we have at SDSU. And then you just go on to the next part. So you need to name what your method is very clearly. You need to tell us the way that the method was deployed, whether it was online especially, or if it was face-to-face, you can just say, you know, an oral survey or a face-to-face survey, whatever the case is. And then move into a little bit about your procedure. If you did an experiment, then you definitely need to dig in to describe what was different about your different experimental cells. And regardless, you have to go through and talk about your instrument. So for example, you might say, because we were studying relationship theory, we used a relationship scale to measure the perceived relationship that the public had with the organization. So we went ahead and employed the Sweetser and Kelleher 2017 11-item relationship management scale. And then you move on to the next thing. You don't have to describe how the scale was created or what it is, but tell us what scales you're using. If you could clearly state your independent variables and your dependent variables, that would be very helpful in the method section. You do not need to read your research questions and hypotheses. How boring would that be, right? Instead, reword them in ways that are conversational. And so I tend to, and you can organize it however it is that you want, but I tend to, once I get to the results section, and I'm talking about what my data actually found, I tend to say things like, so I had a research question that investigated or that asked how often PR practitioners use metrics. And in order to answer this, I did XYZ test and I use these scales and blah, 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 blah. So that way I'm kind of grouping together what either my research question or hypothesis was with the results at that time. And then you have another option. How are we going to do discussion? You can group together the mention of your research question / hypothesis, the results of it, and the discussion all in one package, and then move on to the next package of research question / hypothesis, results / discussion. That's option A. Option B is to do your research question and hypothesis and then the results, and then move to the next research question and hypothesis and then the results, and then at the very end go into what it all means. Definitely triage your findings, because what happens if you run out of time? So make sure that you're presenting the most important things first so that you have the most amount of time to devote to them. And then if you get cut off, you can say, I have more findings, don't really have time to go into them, but I'd be happy to talk to you about them during the question and answer period. and then you can roll into the question and answer period. So be prepared for that and that triage. With regard to what it is you say about the statistics or the results, if you did an ANOVA, then I think it's important to say we did an analysis of variance, or we did an ANOVA to determine whether there was a difference based on experimental cell in assigned level of credibility. Right? I don't need to say the, F was this and the P was this and the da-da-da-da-da was that. You don't have to give the actual numbers, but I think it's important to talk about which test you used and then what you found. Again, extremely conversationally. If there is information that you don't feel comfortable with talking about because it's new to you or it's extremely, scientific with regard to the way the stats are talked about, then don't mention it. Don't bring it up. This is not a complete retelling of your written paper. These are the highlights that you think that your audience would be interested in hearing about. So focus on those highlights. It's extremely important as you finish up your presentation that you do give some sort of a conclusion. And personally, considering the audience of this particular conference, IPRRC, I would absolutely connect it to how practitioners will use this in their actual jobs in the industry, because I think that will strengthen the reception to your research. Additionally, it's important that your entire group practice like crazy on presenting and getting a nice, tight, 7-minute, interesting, compelling presentation. If someone doesn't remember what she's supposed to say, then someone else can pick it up, or it doesn't get said. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. I don't want people to go in there with a script that they feel like they have to read and then end up falling all over themselves and not looking conversational at all. I want you to think through what you need to say, be extremely rehearsed and practiced, and be a nice, tight, well-oiled machine as you present your research to this very important academic group. Throughout the conference, it's important that you participate and that you are present in other people's presentations and that you're asking questions and participating in that. And that will also prepare you for when your presentation time is ready. So we're, of course, going to prepare you as best we can here with the SDSU faculty, and I know you're going to do fantastic with your IPRRC presentation. I wish you all the luck, and if you have any questions about it prior to any presentation practice, then feel free to let me know. Good luck, and I can't wait to hear more about your research and what you found.